Before we talk about belts and boxes, we really ought to talk about how ammunition belts are loaded. The example on the left you can see is a poorly loaded ammunition belt. The tip of the bullet is not far enough forward. On this kind of belt, it should be in line with the front of the long brass strips. But as you'll go on to see, actually you should be using a ammunition belt without brass strips, in which case you should be using it and lining up it with your feed block and getting around an inch of only 1 inch of the round showing at the rear of the ammunition belt, because this is how it feeds in. Otherwise it gets you will get number 3 stoppages if you were firing it, and clearly it looks neater and you won't lose ammunition. You won't lose individual rounds out of the belt. And what you really ought to have is a full ammunition belt, 250 rounds of inert ammunition if you put it on a display. But if you can't do that, then at least try and get enough inert rounds so that the length of belt from the feed block to the ammunition box is full and it looks like a full belt. Clearly empty belts are not how it would have been. So there you go. Let's move on to the other items. Ammunition belts. Ammunition belts dated 1943, clearly Second World War made, clearly being used in the Second World War by the Australians or in training. This example, dyed green, is tropic proofed. So it's an Australian made one, probably Dunlop. I wouldn't bother checking the tab. 1941, 43 dated. There's loads of them around there. What came across in the early 90s, but they were not used in Northwest Europe by anybody, because at that point we were having our ammunition pre-delivered in factory filled liners like this. So the Australian boxes that, again, all came across just weren't used. What you've got is the number 8 ammunition belt box, which dates back to the First World War. This one's broken actually. And the number 10 ammunition belt box. And this is certainly what we came across very commonly because they weren't used very much post-war. They're white. Why would you think they're white? They're for use in armoured fighting vehicles. And actually, the number 10 ammunition belt box has this small flap here that opens up before the larger flap opens up to access the whole belt, because you don't want to take the whole lid off in an armoured fighting vehicle. You just want this piece to go backwards and forwards. They were not used in ground forces. They were not used in Northwest Europe. I think 1940 with a Mark 6 light tank. They do appear in ground forces mounted on boats, and in North Africa, where you're dismounting Vickers machine guns from armoured cars, and in some of the motorised units. But Northwest Europe, anything like that should be these disposable tin liners. 2 of those were carried in this bright blue, bluish green wooden box underneath. That's what's accurate. Anything else is not. Certainly, the brown H51 boxes are not accurate. So this is a H51 ammunition small arms plywood box. They were introduced in 1944 for jungle use. They were the jungle pack ammunition, and 2 of these boxes were carried in the H50, and that became the standard, the norm for like the next 20 years before the H58, I think it is, comes in. Despite these being dated March 1944, it's well known that actually these are wrong. So there's a slightly different style to that, and they were done by reenactors in the 90s. So this one came from that source, and there's actually quite a few around. We know the guys that did it, certainly those in the UK that have said, yep, we rubbed it off. We made it look earlier than it actually was. The rest of the markings are absolutely fine. And they just copied the style of what was correct on this box. So a July 1945 box, absolutely fine. Yet March 1944, as far as I can see, it should be at least September, November time. And then they really didn't see service in Northwest Europe at all, and they were all prepped, ready to go to the Far East with the 1944 pattern equipment or all that kind of stuff, but never did. So yeah, so they're not right to see on the displays at all.